That breaking news comes as the indictment of Mayor LaToya Cantrell's former bodyguard, Jeffrey Vappie. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I'm Sharice Gibson.
And I'm Katie Moore. Vappie was charged in an 8-count federal indictment. He's accused of collecting police pay for official protection duties when he was actually engaged in personal romantic encounters with the mayor. The political implications of this are vast, especially since we know that in the background of all this, there's still a federal investigation going on into Mayor Cantrell herself. And political analyst Clancy DuBos is with us.
All right, Clancy, can you give us your take on the indictment? We heard the hints that the interim NOPD superintendent, Michelle Woodfork, may have been passed over for the job of permanent chief because Vappie was sanctioned by the internal investigators. How do you think that plays into this?
Well, I think that's a major factor among many major factors in this investigation. I'm holding a copy of the 8-count federal indictment of former officer Jeffrey Vappie. And from reading the indictment, it sure appears that the government has a very strong case. He is, of course, presumed innocent until proven guilty, but the indictment outlines the things that they have evidence for. And it's clear that the feds are not relying on hearsay or even he said, she said kind of evidence. It's clear that from the indictment that they have monitored Vappie's searches online, the texting between the two, the fact that they tried to use, allegedly, according to the indictment, WhatsApp to text back and forth, thinking it would be encrypted and that it wouldn't be subject to discovery by anyone. All of that went by the wayside. Clearly, the feds have dug deep and gotten a lot of documentary evidence here. And lots of times, cases can be documentary and they're kind of boring because documentary cases tend to be like tax cases. But this is one where, unfortunately for Officer Vappie and the mayor, the documentary evidence is a compilation of text, romantic type texts between them two, according to the indictment. And then there's the 8th count, which is lying to, making false statements to federal investigators, or as is commonly known as lying to the FBI. And oftentimes, and this is an example of that, there is no crime involved in having a romantic relationship with someone. What the crime, but this romantic relationship, or this alleged romantic relationship, is a factor, not an element of the other crimes, but it is a factor because it explains the motive for some of these things to allegedly happen. Counts 1 through 7, wire fraud, which is essentially a kind of a derivative of payroll fraud, because they allege that Officer Vappie, at the time he was with the mayor in romantic situations, was claiming that he was actually working for the city and on city time doing police work, protection work for the mayor, when the feds say he was actually in a romantic relationship with the mayor. And they itemize exactly what hours and days and how much money was involved. They actually seek to recover that in a forfeiture proceeding, which is also part of this indictment. And then the 8th count, which is lying to the FBI or making false statements. It's not one statement, it's multiple statements, and they detail these statements. They all involve his alleged romantic relationship with the mayor. And so it's another example of the cover-up, or the alleged cover-up is always worse than the crime. And this is a shining example of that. And then you mentioned former interim police chief Woodfork. It doesn't mention her by name, but it also doesn't mention Cantrell by name, but it identifies them in terms that no one else in the universe could possibly be public official 1 or the former interim police chief. And it suggests, or it says, and leaves a very strong implication that the reason that Michelle Woodfork did not get the permanent job is because she wouldn't sweep this under the rug.
Yeah, Clancy, there are obviously some explosive allegations in this indictment, and we're going to be checking back in with you in the next days and weeks as we move forward in covering this. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay, investigative reporter Mike Perstein, he's been following this case closely. He's joining us now in the studio with these really stunning allegations, Mike.
Well, Katie and Sharice, when it comes to political and police news in New Orleans, we often find ourselves saying that facts are almost too wild to be believed. Now, in this indictment charging the mayor's longtime bodyguard, it's a classic example of just that. 14 out-of-town excursions, including trips to Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Scotland. Meals and drinks at local restaurants. Love notes written and sent while nursing a cocktail. That would be material for a romance novel, but in New Orleans today, those are just a few of the details included in an 8-count federal indictment against the mayor's former NOPD bodyguard, Jeffrey Vappie.
And we know that in this particular case, the mayor and Officer Vappie were communicating via cell phones, and we know that the government has those communications.
Those text messages and pictures are cited as evidence by federal authorities in its 16-page indictment that charges Vappie with 7 counts of wire fraud for collecting city pay for his private time with Cantrell, as well as 1 count of lying to the FBI for denying he was having a romantic relationship with the mayor. The indictment spells out the dates and dollar amounts, more than $7,000 altogether, that Vappie collected a paycheck for time he is accused of being with the mayor privately. The indictment also estimates Vappie's city-paid travel expenses with the mayor at more than $47,000. Vappie's denials to FBI agents in July 2023 matched his denials when he was asked earlier that year by internal police investigators looking into Vappie's irregular hours and activities with the mayor.
Is there a personal relationship as defined in Chapter 13.38 that you have with your protecting?
The answer to that is no. This is people using my ability to be professional and accommodating against me to create a picture to make it seem like there's something else going on other than what it is.
The government not only says it has cell phone evidence revealing the romantic relationship, but also efforts by Vappie to cover it up.
There's also references in here that Officer Vappie and the mayor discussed deleting all of their message to attempt to conceal any evidence.
Now, Katie and Therese, we do know that Vappie has hired former U.S. Attorney Harry Rosenberg to represent him. I called Rosenberg for comment today, but he has yet to respond.
All right, thanks so much, Mike. And today's indictment of Mayor Cantrell's bodyguard, Jeffrey Vappie, is part of a larger federal grand jury investigation into the mayor that really dates back years.
Yeah, WWL Louisiana investigator David Hammer has been breaking stories about that probe for years, joining us now in studio to explain, really, David, how today's development fits in.
Yeah, Katie and Therese, we've seen this before in other federal corruption investigations. One person is indicted for his dealings with a public official, and it leads to even more for federal prosecutors. And once again, sources tell us to expect the indictment of Jeffrey Vappie to be just the tip of the iceberg for Mayor Cantrell.
The indictment of Jeffrey Vappie doesn't mention the name LaToya Cantrell, but she's in there on 12 of the 16 pages as public official 1. Sources tell us her role in Vappie's alleged fraud scheme is just the beginning. The grand jury has been looking at Cantrell's business dealings since at least the summer of 2022. That's when we first heard the grand jury issued subpoenas for financial records relating to Cantrell's stylist, Tanya Blunt Haynes. Haynes had made thousands of dollars of purchases for Cantrell and was paid by her mayoral campaign. In September 2022, WWL Louisiana broke the story that Cantrell was essentially living in a city-owned Pontalba apartment. In November 2022, news coverage began focusing on the time Vappie spent in the apartment with Cantrell, and the indictment alleges Vappie and the mayor spent the next several months trying to cover up their romantic relationship. In December 2023, we learned the feds were looking into Cantrell's dealings with 3 local developers who supported her campaigns. 2 of those businessmen were convicted felons and business partners, Randy Farrell and Fouad Ziton. Sources said the feds seized Ziton's phone and found text messages with the mayor and with Farrell. In March of this year, we learned the feds were looking at Farrell's effort to get a top city official who was investigating him fired. And earlier this week, sources told us Farrell paid for tickets for Cantrell to the 2019 NFC Championship game, as well as meals and a new smartphone. Just a few days after Farrell asked the mayor to fire Jennifer Cecil, the mayor did just that.
Now, sources expect Farrell to be indicted soon for giving the mayor gifts in exchange for firing Cecil. Farrell's attorney, Rick Simmons, said his client has already pled guilty on unrelated tax charges and paid more than $700,000 in restitution.
All right, thank you, David. And we do plan to stay close to this case as it plays out in court. We'll have updates for you on our website, WWLTV.com, as well as our free mobile app.